Welcome to the Ohio Department of Transportation's Aesthetic Design Guidelines training. This module is the first of a four-part course that introduces ODOT's approach to design aesthetics. Module 1 will introduce you to the background and basics of ODOT's integrated and multidisciplined aesthetic design process. Module 2 presents aesthetic design concepts and ODOT guidelines that will help you formulate a plan to integrate aesthetic treatments into your specific project. In Module 3, you will learn how to incorporate aesthetics throughout ODOT's project development process. Module 4 introduces you to fundamental aesthetic design principles to help you successfully implement aesthetic treatments into an ODOT project. Upon the completion of these 4 modules, you will have learned how to describe the basic goals and considerations driving ODOT's aesthetic design process, identify the differences between baseline and enhanced treatments, recognize how aesthetic design is incorporated into ODOT projects throughout the project development process, PDP, and describe how to implement aesthetic design into your projects. Click Next to start Module 1. ODOT's aesthetic design guidelines were created to improve the visual appeal and overall aesthetic consistency of our transportation facilities statewide. ODOT considers aesthetics to be inherent to the development of transportation projects and encourages consideration of aesthetics on every project. However, the degree to which aesthetics are implemented is determined on a project-by-project basis throughout ODOT's project development process, PDP. Considering safety, operational efficiency, cost, environmental impacts, and aesthetics is the foundation that ODOT uses in decision-making on every project. ODOT's goal with this program is to ensure that our transportation infrastructure is visually appealing and compatible with the surrounding neighborhoods and communities. By the end of this module, you should be able to identify how and when to use different levels of aesthetic enhancements and describe environmental and funding guidelines for implementing aesthetic treatments. Aesthetics are an important consideration on every project that must be developed and implemented with construction and maintenance costs in mind, and must also meet standard engineering, safety, and functional requirements. References to aesthetic design can be found within ODOT's Bridge Design Manual, BDM, Location and Design Manual, L&D, Volume 1, and Traffic Engineering Manual, TEM. Many other environmental manuals and guidance documents that have been developed in conjunction with the PDP manual also directly or indirectly reference design aesthetics. These manuals and documents address the primary elements in a transportation corridor that are relevant to aesthetics, such as bridges, retaining walls, noise barriers, traffic signals, lighting, signs, and landscaping. As greater emphasis is being placed on design aesthetics, ODOT is working to establish consistency among the wide variety of manuals and guidance documents that address aesthetics. Our goal is to provide project teams with the necessary tools and information for successfully incorporating aesthetic design into ODOT projects using our PDP. In an effort to establish a consistent look and feel to our transportation system statewide, and to better ensure our projects fit into surrounding neighborhoods and communities, ODOT has developed a level of aesthetic design that is incorporated into every project. This baseline of aesthetic design is the foundation of aesthetic design for any project and forms the standard that all projects must meet. The aesthetic design guidelines outline those aesthetic elements that are necessary for ODOT's projects. Aesthetic treatments that go beyond those identified baseline treatments are considered to be enhancements. ODOT's baseline treatments are geared toward establishing aesthetics that create cohesive, uncluttered, and visually appealing transportation corridors. Most ODOT projects will be aesthetically defined by baseline treatments, and will not require enhanced aesthetics. Enhanced aesthetic treatments are implemented in addition to or in place of baseline treatments and are typically found in high-profile urban corridors, gateway corridors, and interchanges. Enhanced treatments are often designed to address specific public or environmental issues and add bold, eye-catching, and memorable aesthetic elements to the corridor. Enhancements are often more expensive to construct and maintain than baseline treatments and must be compatible with ODOT's guidelines for funding and maintenance. It's critical to ensure that enhanced treatments fit the surrounding landscape and are consistent with baseline treatments implemented elsewhere along the transportation corridor. There are several common project types or characteristics that influence when and how baseline or enhanced treatments are used in ODOT's aesthetic design process. The use of baseline treatments is typically appropriate for ODOT projects when no previously established aesthetic theme exists within or adjacent to a project area, and when no special aesthetic treatments were committed to as a result of either stakeholder and community involvement or environmental considerations. Enhanced treatments are generally appropriate for projects when there is a previously established aesthetic theme within or adjacent to a project area, or when the project requires environmental commitments related to aesthetics. Enhanced treatments are also appropriate when stakeholders and the local community agree on them, or when another group, such as a local public agency, is sponsoring the project and wants enhancements. Many ODOT projects are considered exempt from any aesthetic considerations. Exempt projects include routine construction and maintenance activities that provide little or no opportunity for incorporating or improving aesthetic treatments in a transportation corridor, above and beyond the baseline. We'll discuss more about exempt projects later in this training. ODOT may incorporate aesthetic enhancements into project plans in response to public or agency comments or to minimize or mitigate impacts on environmental resources. Such resources may include Section 106 historic properties and Section 4F properties, as well as scenic rivers and areas with traditionally underserved populations. Examples of environmental commitments that incorporate aesthetic treatments include installing special landscaping, such as earthen mounds, decorative plantings, and ornamental fencing. Refurbishing playground or park equipment and adding decorative mulch and plants. Using green techniques, such as natural channel design and living walls instead of concrete or rock. Or salvaging historic structural or engineering elements and displaying them with sidewalks, landscaping, and informational plaques or kiosks for public viewing. Let's take a look at some examples of environmental considerations and guidance documents that can be relevant to aesthetics. Funding for aesthetic treatments is an important consideration. While ODOT wants to provide Ohio's residents with a visually pleasing transportation system, project budgets are limited, and the state's construction and maintenance needs are extensive. Baseline aesthetic treatments are included in applicable ODOT design manuals for implementation across a broad range of project types. Baseline treatments are consistent with ODOT safety and operational requirements and are cost-effective in most applications. There is no specific threshold for justifying the cost of baseline treatments. The cost of baseline aesthetic features is automatically included in overall project construction cost. Some local public agencies have developed their own baseline standards for use within their own jurisdiction. ODOT considers the use of these baseline standards in lieu of ODOT's baseline on a case-by-case basis. There is no specific cost threshold for enhanced treatments that are implemented as a result of environmental commitments made by ODOT during the NEPA process to minimize or mitigate impacts. The aesthetics review will evaluate these enhanced treatments on a case-by-case basis for each project. Let's take a quick look at how the funding of enhanced treatments will work. Select each shape of the funding process to learn more. Additional information on this process will be provided in a later module. The planning and design process is when ODOT incorporates baseline treatments into the project and determines that enhanced treatments, if any, are appropriate for a project based on environmental impacts, stakeholder, or public involvement. A detailed cost analysis is performed to determine and justify the cost and need for the enhanced treatments. Remember, the project budget will already include the cost of baseline treatments. Once the cost estimate is prepared, but before any commitment to stakeholders or the public has been made, the project's aesthetic features are submitted to ODOT's Aesthetics Committee for review and approval. The Aesthetics Committee will review the project's aesthetic needs and treatments and decide on the level of funding from ODOT. In most cases, funding of aesthetic enhancements beyond what ODOT feels is necessary or appropriate will be the responsibility of the stakeholder requesting the enhanced treatments. ODOT uses participation agreements to formalize funding and maintenance commitments between ODOT and the project stakeholder, typically a local public agency. In addition to detailing funding participation, the agreement also specifies who is funding and performing project maintenance. Congratulations! You have completed Module 1 of ODOT's Aesthetic Design Guidelines training. You should now be able to identify how and when to use different levels of aesthetic enhancements and describe environmental and funding guidelines for implementing aesthetic treatments. You can access the Aesthetic Design Guidelines or ODOT's website for more information. Select Next to take a final assessment.